Good evening. I'm Andrea Abrams. I am the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at Centre College, and I welcome you tonight to our Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. Thank you all for being here. I want to say special welcome to President and Mrs. Moreland, Mr. and Mrs. Roush, Mayor and Mrs. Atkins, Center students, Center staff, Center faculty, and especially the members of the community. We thank you for joining us this evening in celebration of Dr. King's life and legacy. This is an evening to celebrate the ways in which his work has furthered the human dream of love, justice, belonging, and peace. This is also an event to help center our thoughts on the ways in which we can individually and collectively treat others in ways that we want to be treated, with respect, grace, compassion, and a fair chance to be our best selves. Most importantly, we want to be inspired to be proactive about being the change that we want to see in the world, not waiting for opportunities to do good, but actively seeking out those spaces to love one another. I have no doubt that you will be inspired this evening by the words of our students, particularly the members of Center's Black Student Organization, by my colleague in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, Jessica Chisley, by the words of our guest speaker, alumnus, and a former student of mine, Dexter Horn. And you will most certainly be inspired by the performance of Rashay Ford. Again, you are welcome.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun. Weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people. While the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night, that's when I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on, I can feel it in my bones. Early in the morning, before the sun begins to shine, we're gonna start moving towards that separating line. I'm wading through muddy waters. You know I got a made up mind, and I don't mind if I lose any blood on the way to salvation. And I'll fight with the strength that I got until I die. So I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kamara Bailey, and I am the governance chair for Center College's Black Student Organization. I will be sharing my piece titled Our Challenge. In September of 2022, I took the first bath of return at Asin Manso Slave River, located in the central region of Ghana. The Asin Manso Slave River served as a place where enslaved West Africans had their last bath on African soil before being marched over 40 miles to the slave dungeons of Elmina and Cape Coast. As a Black woman, the first bath of return symbolized the physical and generational return to an ancestral land and a series of beautiful cultures. It was also a powerful moment of recognizing the deadly displacement of my ancestors, and a personal call to confront the ways in which systems of oppression continue to affect the lives of people who experience marginalization within the United States of America. My time in Ghana was enriching, empowering, and life-changing. The return encouraged me to reflect on the ways our actions today can shape the way institutions equitably progress or continue to systemically oppress people who experience marginalization. Today, we all gather here to honor the memory of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. His call to action forces us to confront the harsh realities of the past and provides hope for a better future. His call, and that of countless individuals, both past and present, committed to justice, demonstrates the continuous and communal effort that goes into paving a way to equality and justice. Before you leave today, I challenge everyone who is present, as well as those watching online, to reflect on the ways this country's past continues to shape and influence inequities that exist today. I challenge us to show up for each other. I challenge us to work together to uphold King's dream of justice and equality so that generations of tomorrow may know a world of possibilities where they are free to dream and achieve whatever their heart desires, regardless of their skin, textured or curl of hair, background, religion, or identity. I leave you with 14 impactful words spoken by Dr. King in his 1963 I Have a Dream speech. He said, "We cannot walk alone, and as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead." Thank you.
I love you too. Good evening, everyone. My name is Glines Paul, and I am the president of Center College's Black Student Organization. We're closing in on 125 days until I cross this very stage. I've been going through something. I've been reflecting on one word, and that one word is legacy. To me, and many of my peers, the future may seem uncertain or overwhelming. But this time of change gives us the energy to empathize and appreciate those who've come before. Those whose victories gave us opportunities, and those whose losses give us lessons. Those who followed the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And in the spirit of recognizing those who came before us, it will be my honor to introduce you to Dexter Horn. Hold on. Dexter Horn is a senior policy analyst at the Council of State Governments, where he works with private sector partners and state leaders to develop the best practices in areas of civic, workforce, fiscal, and health policy. Dexter also serves as the state co-director for the Kentucky chapter of New Leaders Council, a leadership development organization working to build a network of inclusive, cross-sector leaders who will transform the Commonwealth through social and political change rooted in equity. In 2016, Dexter earned his bachelor's degree in politics from, guess where? Center College. He earned his MPA from the Martin School of Public Policy and Administration in the spring of 2018. So please join me in giving a round of applause and a big center welcome to this speaker, Dexter Horn.
Right. So thank you all. Thank you for that warm introduction. Thank you, Danville. Thank you, Center College. 2016, it doesn't sound like it was that long ago, but it's been a long time. And I'm excited to be back here, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to share with you my thoughts on Dr. King and on what I've learned about community and about change making in the world outside of Center since my time here as a student. So I'm just going to jump right into it. During my time up here, I'm going to talk to you about three things. So first, I'm going to give you a cautionary tale. This is going to be a little story about me and how in my last big attempt to transform an unjust system, I did not have the right mindset, and as a result, I didn't do too good. And then second, I'm going to tell a few stories about Martin Luther King and show that even he needed the talents of a diverse and redemptive community to make a difference in his time. And then finally, by the end of this, I hopefully will convince you that none of us actually needs to be great to succeed at making a difference. We, just like Dr. King, didn't need to be great at everything to create a world that is more just than the one he inherited. By the end of my time up here, you will know my definition of a beloved community mindset and why I feel that cultivating this mindset is the most useful thing that each of us can do today to make our world better during the short time that we have on it. So first, it starts with me. As you heard, my name is Dexter Horn, and I was once a Center student like many of you. I graduated in 2016, and in the almost 7 years since, I've tried to do my version of Dr. King's mission to make the world a more just, equitable, and inclusive place. And somehow, every day, I wake up to a world that is not just worse than it was the day before, but way worse than it was when I first got here in 2012. So I'm going to take you back to my mindset then. So we're going to go, I guess, more than 10 years back. I came to Center when the entire campus was on lockdown. That time, not because of a global pandemic. I do think that you all had it worse. But for me, the campus was locked down because this place was crawling with Secret Service agents as we prepared for a debate between then Vice President Joe Biden and Representative Paul Ryan. This was just, this is dating myself a little bit, but this was just a couple years after Boyle County went wet. And drinking age students no longer had to drive several counties over to buy natural lights and brunettes, which is what we were drinking at the time. Personally, Spotify existed, but I did not have an account yet. I was broke at the time. And the most popular song on the radio was the main character complex theme music of every bangs-wearing manic pixie dream girl in America, a song that I hope you all have heard. It's called Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen. And a song which I admit still slaps to this day, though in 2012 I was not able to rock bangs and I have not been able to do so since. Anyway, at the time, I walked onto campus with the swaggering confidence of a young millennial who knew very little about anything, but was sure he could accomplish everything. And the one thing I really knew I wanted to do was that I wanted to be of service to the world. I was a politics major and a Bonner Scholar after all, and I was sure of my ability to get things done if I was given the chance. I believed that all of the world's problems could be easily fixed by the learned, the driven, the charismatic, people like me. Begin quote, I will study and be ready, then maybe the chance will come, end quote. They dropped the Abraham Lincoln statue in front of Crowns my freshman year. And as a student here, I would gaze up at it and wonder, drinking from those words inscribed in the statue's stone base, the liquors of hope and freedom, hope for a better America, and faith that we would be able to get there and give more people freedom in this nation. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s and out of school altogether that I learned how self-indulging and misplaced my theory on change actually was. So here's what went down. This is several years outside of Center College now. I was 26 years old, and I was overseeing all community service, political advocacy, and civic engagement work for the largest organization in Louisville that served young professionals. My team, we did things like organizing voter registration drives. We hosted community service events, and we advocated for policies at the local and state level that we felt would make Louisville, or life in Louisville, better for the young adults like us in it. And overwhelmingly, our work was celebrated. No one in the entire city had a negative thing to say about us until the spring of 2020, which is when Breonna Taylor was killed. So that summer, as you could imagine, hundreds of people were marching past my home in Louisville in the dead of night, yelling, "Breonna was asleep too. No justice, no peace." And as we masked up and marched with them, some of my peers were being tear gassed, threatened, and harassed by their own government. The deep tissue pain of being black in America ran through every hollow corridor of society, and I and my allies on that Young Professionals board wanted to do something about it, or in the least say something about it. But unfortunately, the more we tried to do, the more our presence made the leadership of that board uncomfortable. If we were to even utter the word racism, something in their minds would immediately hit the panic button and attempt to shut down or divert conversation. When we suggested actions, the president of that board would do mental gymnastics trying to find ways to disable us from moving forward, and then punish us for making him look like the bad guy. And then those against us on that board would talk at length about how they hated racism and how they wanted to see it eradicated from our city, and in the same breath would tell me that the suggestions I was making were too political or just not in our organization's lane. At the time, I felt like I was screaming into the ether for help while the world below shushed me for being too loud. And instead of help, we got retaliation. The organization's president began lashing out at anyone who spoke up for greater action. And then once it was obvious that our side had lost this debate, my good friend on that board and ally in this drama, Leah Kelly, who was another Center alum, asked me to protect my peace and know that we had done all that we could. But again, I thought that determination and intelligence were alone enough, and I started lashing back. Everything that president of the board gave me, I would return in equal measure. I pushed even harder, and then I had the audacity at the end of the year, after openly fighting with the leadership of this organization, to run for president so that I could control its vision myself. So after pissing off the person with the most power on the board, I'm sure you all can guess how that went. Not only did I not win the presidency in that board, but I was kicked off of it altogether. And I reflect on that sort of in a laughing way now, but at the time I was devastated. I was frustrated with myself, with my inability to make even the small corner of the world that I felt like I was in control of respond in a moment of social unrest. I was afraid that I had thrown away my reputation to fight for an anti-racist future, which I thoroughly believed in, but for which I had failed to get any results for. And I was surprised. I had studied, I thought I was ready, but when my time to step up came, I had been knocked down hard. And it was in the shadow of this disappointing time that I found a book by Taylor Branch called Parting the Waters, America During the King Years, 1954 to 1963. Despite the fact that that book is as long and dense as a dictionary and would knock me out if it ever fell off my bookshelf, and it's probably a book I would not have read had it been assigned to me here at Center College, I read the whole thing. And I read it because I was hoping to learn more about Dr. King and how he accomplished so much in a time of high racial conflict. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about myself and why I had managed to accomplish so little in 2020 when racial animus was at a high point again. And here's what I learned. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is often heralded as a single charismatic force that through willpower and unnatural skills changed the world. That's how I've always thought of him. But what I learned from reading this book is that had he really believed that about himself, I'm sure he would have had as little success changing hearts and policy as I did on my Young Professionals board. The real story is much more complicated. Most of King's deficiencies are forgotten or deemed unimportant only because he had a community of talented and passionate people around him who added their many skills to the movement so that someone else was always in position to pick up wherever he lacked. I want to give you just a few examples of this. First, I think it's safe to say that Dr. King wasn't always the best boss. His organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, or SCLC, was constantly hurt by the fact that he wasn't very good at making sure that his operation was responsive, that the bills got paid, and that the rank and file felt valued. Enter Stanley Levison, a white Jewish man who King considered to be one of his closest confidants. Between 1957 and 68, it's estimated that Dr. King gave over 2,500 speeches and that he traveled over 6 million miles to protest and march for civil rights. While King worked the microphone, Stanley Levison oversaw many of the day-to-day demands of the SCLC and professionalized its fundraising so that the movement wouldn't go broke. Additionally, Levison helped King draft early versions of his I Have a Dream refrain, which was famously ad-libbed at the March on Washington. So had not this friendship between a black preacher and a white Jewish man and attorney blossomed, it's possible that King's organization would have gone bankrupt, and one of the most famous and politically galvanizing speeches of American history will have fallen flat and been left out of our history books altogether. Another limitation that I learned Dr. King had was that he was in the black male preacher elite. And because of that, he viewed everything through that lens, and he wasn't always great at connecting with women, youth, or folks who were of lower class than him. Fortunately, here too, he had help. Ella Baker was a political activist who, along with many other black women, did the bulk of the hard labor of the civil rights movement. She had the unenviable job of organizing the SCLC's dangerous voter registration drives in 10 states across the Jim Crow South, during a time when the organization provided very few resources to the task but demanded results. She also invited arguably the most important demographic to play a more prominent role in the civil rights movement, young people. Baker encouraged the creation of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. And SNCC, as many of you probably know, would go on to support the Freedom Rides, the March on Washington, and created new leaders for the movement, such as John Lewis, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Stokely Carmichael. From the pictures of young lunch counter protesters having drinks poured down their heads, to the burning Freedom Ride bus in Alabama, to the iconic photos of hundreds of thousands standing at the Washington Mall demanding jobs and freedom, some of the hardest fought battles of King's civil rights movement were planned and fought by the young, by the poor, and by women of all colors and creeds. For Dr. King to become the Dr. King that we celebrate today, he needed people like Ella Baker by his side too. King also owed his entire leadership philosophy not to himself, but to a queer black man. During a time of nearly unfathomable homophobia, the guiding consciousness of the fight for racial equity were the thoughts and labor of a guy named Bayard Rustin. For it was Rustin who taught King the tactics of nonviolent resistance. And the most pivotal moment of the era, the one stapled in our memories of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., was also thanks to, in large part, to this leftist, radical, gay black man. Rustin managed to organize the March on Washington in less than 60 days. Many of us in this room would have never heard Martin Luther King's dream had it not been for the leadership and talent of a queer person. Finally, for all the social power that Dr. King carried, he lacked the political power to get the change he wanted to see. For that, he needed to add to his community the people who he had the most disagreements with, white moderates. He especially needed two important white moderates to take on personal risk and join him in his dream for a better America: John and Robert F. Kennedy. Just as people like Levison and Baker and Rustin were needed to create and sustain the civil rights movement, King needed the Kennedys to turn the movement's demands into policy. And for years, neither brother wanted to do it. President Kennedy and Attorney General Robert Kennedy are remembered as civil rights champions, but they were not Dr. Martin Luther King's friends. They spent most of their time in power begrudgingly assisting him. Their relationship with King was one filled with snubs, broken promises, and such a lack of trust that they approved an FBI wiretap on him. But in all of this time, Dr. King never severed his relationship with these brothers. He never publicly eviscerated them, though he had many reasons to want to. Despite the deep chasms between these leaders, King kept working with them both, believing in their quiet desire to do what was right and remaining hopeful that they would one day join the side of justice. And in the end, due to the persistence of the movement and its leaders, they both came to see the urgent need for civil rights legislation. Their public support of a civil rights package paved the way for President Lyndon Johnson to take up the fight after President Kennedy was assassinated. And the rest, of course, is history, but only because King's beloved community was willing to accept even its critics. King understood that the individual cannot dismantle unjust systems, but the individual can challenge those systems wherever the two meet and encourage others to join them in that work. The individual can make their challenge stronger by choosing to display empathy and seeking mutually beneficial relations with people who desire a better world, instead of seeing every encounter with someone different as zero-sum. When Martin Luther King Jr. was brilliant at, and what I have not been so good at doing, is extending that empathy, that belief in redemption, to those he didn't like and to those who didn't like him. That superpower is at the heart of a beloved community mindset. In learning these things about Dr. King, I've come to define that mindset as one that allows all people to contribute to our project for a more perfect union, and one that moves beyond ego and the politics of shame. That's what I've been getting wrong in my own growth journey since my time as a bright-eyed freshman here at Centre College, listening to Carly Rae Jepsen and pretending to have bangs, stealing pennies from Abraham Lincoln's feet. The president of that organization that kicked me off the board, I never even tried to bring him into my way of thinking. I was angry with him for not getting it, for becoming afraid and rejecting my desire to fight for an organization in a world that he didn't recognize. I made him feel like the bad guy, the privileged white boy who had failed up into a leadership position in which he had been unprepared for. I made him feel stupid. I made him feel like a racist. And I made it known that I didn't like him. Now, it's also fair to say that he did these things to himself. He shouldn't have abused his power. He shouldn't have been so afraid. He shouldn't have been put in that position, in my opinion, and he shouldn't have been acting racist. And I think that all of that is very true. But it's also true that I, in my stubbornness, made doing the right thing less about finding strategic ways to build my community of people who would solve the problem, and I instead made it more about us versus them, those fighting for equity and those fighting against it. It wasn't enough for me to want change. I also wanted to be vindicated for the hurt that I was feeling at that time, which I think is natural, and which I think is very, very human. But it's also the opposite of acting out of a beloved community mindset, but to actually change unjust systems. Who knows if I would have succeeded in making that volunteer board take a firmer stance against racism had I let that one white moderate in on my vision, or had I the patience to massage his fears and find compromise. Certainly, though, I probably wouldn't have been kicked off that board, and I would have gotten more done in the long run had I not made him my enemy from the jump. And I think that that's the lesson. My generation, the millennials, and the generation below me, Gen Z, which many of you are a part, I think that we are very good at seeing the value of people who differ from us. I think we too have the skill to bring the white Jewish man, the black woman, and the queer person together to create robust and lasting solutions to our problems. Where we might improve is in learning how to expand our community so that even the conservative white man, the politically moderate lesbian, the capitalist-minded Latin American also see our push for justice as something in which they can contribute instead of only portraying them as villains against our progress. To do the hardest things, we need to lead with a mindset that includes even our harshest critics and our plans for a brighter tomorrow. A community mindset does just that because it is equal parts inclusive and redemptive. With it, Dr. King helped inspire a movement that crossed race, gender, sexuality, religion, ideology, and class that won Black Americans the freedom to do once impossible things. Which brings me to my final point. At the end of the day, like Dr. King, none of us in this room needs to be individually great or exceptional to make our world more just. If the communities we cultivate are great enough to hold difference, to hold people accountable for their actions, and hold opportunities for growth and redemption, we can accomplish anything. And I do mean anything. The strength of humankind has always been and always will be in our cooperation. We will win the test of the 21st century together. We will heal the heavens whose ozone layer we depleted so that again the skies are places we turn to see the face of faith instead of fear. We will force our governments to respect the cries of the rising seas and slow the doomsday clock which ticks with the sound of cracking ice shelves. We will question our gods, the free market forces that have made our country unsustainably inequitable, and conceive of a new economic religion that centers the health of humanity over the gluttony of private wealth. We will unsubscribe from patriarchy and redefine manhood so that masculinity is no longer defined by violence against self, against women, against non-binary, against the other, but is instead the performance of a brave and selfless love that we can all be proud to practice freely. We will study war no more and focus our energies on a politics of competing solutions instead of a politics of competing identities. We will win. Not because we as individuals are great. We aren't. We suck. We keep proving that. We will win because we as a community suffer fewer demons when we lean on the better angels of our cooperative nature. So Danville, Kentucky, students, faculty, and staff of Centre College, the past isn't over. It's hardly even past. The heroes of the civil rights movement are not historical artifacts that we come back to and think about for a day or for a month. That movement continues to this day. Its heroes are in this very room. I joked earlier that the world has only seemed to get worse since I started thinking about how to make it better, and that might be true. But it is also true that in its current state, it is primed and ready and due for improvement. I hope that you will join me in that project by cultivating a mindset in your own life that is equal parts inclusive and redemptive. I am committed to this task, and I'm ready to help any of you who are committed to it as well. So call me maybe, and let's continue this conversation on how to make our beloved communities wider and our world more just. Thank you, and good night.
Thank you, Dexter. To all who have gathered here today, and to those who join us online virtually, I want to extend a very warm good evening. My name is Jessica Chisley, and I am the Assistant Director of Diversity and Inclusion Student Programming here at Centre College. On this very special evening, I'm here to offer a few reflections on an iconic poem turned hymn and anthem. The text printed on the back of your program is a poem written in 1899 by James Weldon Johnson. It was the dawn of the 21st century. Observing the segregation, the inequality, and deplorable treatment of Black Americans, Mr. Weldon, a poet, a lawyer, a principal, and an NAACP icon. Sorry, I'm an athlete, yeah, NCAA, okay, my bad. All right, so an NAACP leader was inspired by grit and determination he observed in his people. Regardless of the barriers to equality, the broken promises, the injustices, the community, the Black community, believed that there was a brighter day ahead, better days ahead. With a spirit that could never be broken and resiliency coursing through their veins, Mr. Weldon felt a calling in his soul and set pen to paper. What resulted captured the essence of Black resilience and fueled the hopes and dreams of Black America. Little did he know that what manifested in his mind took hold of his fingers and flowed through his pen onto the page would become the heartbeat of an entire people. And it uplifted generations to come. After writing his poem, his brother, J. Rosamond Johnson, set the words to music. Then, in Jacksonville, Florida, ahead of celebrations honoring Abraham Lincoln, the brother duo sent their poem to their New York publisher, Edward B. Marks, who made mimeographed copies for them. The song was taught to a chorus of 500 Black school children in the segregated Stanton School, where James Weldon was principal. The song was sung for the first time ever on February the 12th, 1900. In his own words, captured via interview, Mr. Weldon describes, open quote, "Shortly after the celebrations concluded, my brother and I moved away from Jacksonville to New York. The song passed out of our minds. But the school children of Jacksonville, they kept singing it. They went off to other schools and they sung it. They became teachers and they taught it to other children. Within 20 years of being sung throughout the South, the song was being sung in other parts of the country as well. The lines of this song repay me an elation almost of exquisite anguish whenever I hear it sung by Negro children," close quote. As the song was embraced by more Black Americans across the United States, it became commonly known as the Negro National Hymn. This may have been largely due to the style in which his brother composed the piece and the emotion that is captured through the song's key, which is A-flat major, as well as the tight use of harmonies that are the hallmark of Black choirs in the South. By 1919, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, adopted the song and dubbed it the Negro, or as it's called today, the Black National Anthem. Today, nearly 123 years later, the song serves as a reminder of the dark past and path Black Americans have walked and still walk to get to where we stand today. Through the legacies of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the late Senator John Lewis, and many other civil rights pioneers, we continue to be reminded that there is work yet to be done. Therefore, James Weldon's message remains relevant to this day and stands as a timeless exaltation to never lose sight of the darkness that still lurks within the shadows of our humanity. It's an exaltation to remember that the lives that continue to be lost through racialized violence, people by the name of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, Philando Castillo, Sandra Bland, Alton Sterling, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many others. Lift Every Voice and Sing stands as a timeless exaltation to persist, to carry the torch of the past, and light the path to an even brighter future for generations that will come long after us. Most importantly, it's a reminder to continue knocking down barriers of inequality and division that place ceilings and limitations on the abilities and the capabilities of Black and brown people, as well as those who live within the margins of this country. Barriers that stand to uphold division and to halt further progress. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Temi Hastrup, and I would like to invite you all to join me in singing Lift Every Voice and Sing. Please stand if you are able.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Oh, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stormy the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the day when hope unborn had died. Yes, with a steady beat, have not weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way with that tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Oh, out of the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of a bright star is cast. God of our weary us far on the way. Thou who hast by thy mind led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, oh, we pray. Oh, bless our feet straight from the places of God where we met thee. Bless our hearts drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
Oh, that was beautiful. This entire evening has been beautiful. Thank you everyone for joining us. I want to thank particularly our interpreter, this wonderful group on stage, the Black Student Organization, and all of their talent. I want to thank Rashay Ford and the group that came with him. Wasn't that a beautiful way to start this evening? And I want to thank Dexter Horn. Proud of you. That his beautiful speech on the power of community, and especially on the ways in which we can expand the beloved community. As you leave this evening, remember the words of Dr. King. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So please let your voices and your talents be in service of others. And as you do so, remember another King quote. Before any other action we take, we must remember to move forward with love. So love, power, and a good evening to you all.